Hey, it's been a minute. Life took me on a bit of a healthcare journey, but I'm back and I've got something important for you today. Because today we're talking about something we don't usually question, the stories we believe. Not just the obvious ones in books or religion, but the deeper ones, the myths that shape how we see the world, how we judge each other, and even how we decide what's right and wrong. And here's the uncomfortable part: when stories stop being guidance and start being absolute truth, they can stop being helpful and start becoming dangerous. We're going to look at what happens when myth loses its symbolic meaning, when belief hardens into certainty, and when that certainty begins to shape real-world harm. This isn't about tearing down faith, it's about asking a harder question. What happens when we forget what stories were meant for in the first place? Let's get into it.
Intuitive Gnosticism. This week.
For as long as humans have existed, we've told stories. Stories about where we came from, stories about why we suffer, stories about what it means to be good, to be chosen, to be saved. Before there were textbooks, there were parables. Before there were doctrines, there were myths. And those stories were never meant to trap us. They were meant to teach us. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. We stopped asking what the story means and started insisting on what the story is. And when that happens, stories stop guiding us and start controlling us. Let me be clear about something right at the start. This is not a message against faith. This is not a message against religion. This is not even a message against myth. Myth is one of the most powerful tools humanity has ever been given. Myth is how we speak about things too big for plain language: love, fear, creation, purpose, even God. Myth doesn't tell us how the world was built like a machine. It tells us how to live inside the world like a soul. But myth has purpose. It is meant to point beyond itself. And when we mistake the symbol for the destination, we lose both. Think about how Jesus taught. He didn't hand out systematic theology textbooks. He told stories. A farmer scattering seeds, a father welcoming a lost son, a traveler stopping to help a wounded stranger. These weren't news reports. They were invitations. No one asked, did that exact farmer exist? Because that wasn't the point. The point was transformation. But imagine if someone had taken those parables and said, this story happened exactly like this. And if you don't believe every detail, you're an enemy. The meaning would vanish, the life would drain out of it, and all that would remain is control. Here's the truth we don't like to admit. The human mind is incredibly good at turning stories into reality, not because the stories are true in a literal sense, but because they feel true. And when something feels true and gives us identity and gives us belonging, we will defend it, even at the cost of others. A few years ago, there was a fictional character created online, a tall, faceless figure known as Slender Man. It was never meant to be real. It was a collaborative story, a piece of modern folklore. But for some, especially young minds searching for meaning or belonging, that story crossed a line. It became real enough that harm was done in its name. Now that may sound extreme, but the mechanism isn't. Because the danger wasn't the story itself. The danger was what happens when the mind says, this is not symbolic, this is real, and I must act on it. And we see the same pattern on a much larger scale, not just in isolated cases, but in entire movements. Take what's often called Christian nationalism. At its core, it takes sacred language and fuses it with national identity. It tells a story. We are chosen, our nation is ordained, our way must be protected at all cost. Now again, the danger is not Christianity. The danger is what happens when the story becomes unquestionable fact, because then exclusion becomes righteousness, power becomes divine will, and harm becomes justified. Racism can be reframed as order. Misogyny can be reframed as biblical truth, and control can be reframed as faithfulness. Not because the teachings demand it, but because the story has been hardened into something it was never meant to be. We see similar patterns in forms of Islamic extremism. Sacred texts, rich with history and context, are stripped down and flattened. Metaphor becomes command. Context becomes irrelevant. Context becomes irrelevant. Compassion becomes secondary. And again, the issue is not Islam. The issue is what happens when interpretation disappears, when questioning disappears, when humility disappears. If we step back, we start to see something unsettling. These are not separate problems. They are the same pattern repeating itself over and over again. It goes like this. A sacred story is told. That story becomes literalized. Identity forms around it. Outsiders are seen as threats, and eventually, harm is justified. Not because people are inherently evil, but because they believe they are absolutely right. This is where we need to be very honest with ourselves. The most dangerous words a person can say are not, "I don't believe." The most dangerous words are, "God agrees with me completely." Because once we believe that, there is no room left for growth, no room left for correction, for love to challenge us, none of that. But look again at Jesus. He constantly resisted this kind of certainty. When people clung to rigid interpretations of law, he broke them. When people tried to draw clean lines between us and them, he erased them. When people used religion to control, exclude, or condemn, he stood on the side of the human being in front of him. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, truth serves life. Life does not serve ideology. So what does healthy faith look like? It looks like humility. It says, I may not fully understand. I might be wrong. Let me grow. Let me listen. It holds its stories with reverence, but not with clenched fists. Because it understands something vital. If your belief requires you to harm others, you have misunderstood the story. Myths are not lies. They are mirrors. They show us who we are. They show us who we could become. But if we stop looking into the mirror and start worshiping the glass, we lose the reflection entirely. So here's the invitation today. Hold your stories, treasure them, learn from them. Let them shape you, but don't confuse them with the fullness of truth. Because the moment we stop questioning, the moment we stop listening, the moment we stop loving beyond our certainty, we are no longer being guided by the story. We're being ruled by it. And faith was never meant to make us smaller. It was meant to make us more compassionate, more aware, more human. So let your stories breathe, let them grow, let them challenge you, and above all, let love remain greater than certainty. As we close, I've been dealing with some health issues. We're still working through it, but we're moving forward. For now, I'll be posting a long-form video every week or two, along with 4 or 5 shorts each week, so there's still plenty of space for us to keep these conversations going. And honestly, I've missed this. I've missed making these videos, and I'm grateful to be back in it with you. If this message meant something to you, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed and maybe dropped a like or comment so it can reach someone else who might need it too. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.
Do you like bad videos, Jimmy? The kind that make you laugh till you fall? Do you like wild wisdom and Gnostic tales that lift your spirit most of all?